Dear ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andriy Shevchenko. On behalf of Mediacentru Ukraine, I'm welcoming all journalists who are sharing the truth about our fight for freedom. Our next guest is Tamila Tasheva, who is the permanent representative of the President of Ukraine in Crimea. Tamila, welcome. Glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. I would like to discuss a few issues related to Crimean Tatars and the Crimea itself. Let's start with the yesterday's anniversary of deportation of Crimean Tatars. What is the situation with Crimean Tatars on the peninsula? Starting from 2014, we've been following the events related to Medjlis and the cleansing and the repressions of Crimean Tatars. Has anything changed after 2014? Thank you for the question. Yesterday we did commemorate this sad anniversary that was the genocide against Crimean Tatars, the deportation from their ethnic land. Yesterday, Canada, as you know, recognized that this was the genocide against the Crimean Tatars. We see that there is the repetition of the events that happened 70 years ago. The only difference is that back then, Crimean Tatars as ethnic community were subject to genocide. Now we see the crimes of genocide committed against Ukrainians. They are repressed. There is cleansing. We know that more than 500,000 people were forcefully taken to the territory of the Russian Federation. Going back to your question, of course, we closely follow the situation with the rights of Crimean Tatars on the peninsula. The situation, unfortunately, is deteriorating because Crimea is being used as a military base. They are trying to conscript Crimean Tatars to fight in the war against Ukrainians. So they send them as the cannon fodder to Ukrainian territories. They are also persecuting the activists. For example, Rashid Ajakharov, who is the activist representative of Medjlis, Mr. Svetlayev, Zair Svetlayev, who were also subject to administrative arrest for 15 days. That was administrative arrest. Also, we are talking about newly occupied territories, in particular Kherson region, Zaporizhia region, Melitopol town, where there is a big Crimean Tatar community residing there. And there are threats of a full-scale invasion of our country, because you know that 70% of Crimean Tatars who reside in Kherson region, they had to leave their homes again, the way they were forced to do 78 years ago, because there were more than 10,000 Crimean Tatars residing in Kherson region. 70% of them were forced to leave their homes. Russian troops were coming to their homes, knocking on their doors, gathering information, demanding that they answer whether they were involved in the military activities in the east since 2014, or they were involved in the protests back in 2015, whether they have any relation to Medjlis, etc. So these people are approached periodically. I can provide an example of Adam Bekirov family, who is a political prisoner. His wife, Volnara, is the member of Medjlis of Crimean people. So when they were not at home, at that time they were in hospital in Kyiv, I know that their parents were approached, and they were trying to get Russians were trying to get information, and they were trying to search their apartment. So there is a constant pressure put against Tatars. Let's talk about yesterday. Yesterday was the sad anniversary of deportation of Crimean Tatars in 1944. Were there any events dedicated to that? What do Russians do in Crimea? They are trying to use this tragic day in order to spread their own propaganda and do their propaganda campaign. Yesterday, Crimean leaders, the so-called Crimean leaders, they did organize a rally, um, but instead of talking about the genocide against Crimean Tatars, they focused on the statement that not only Crimean Tatars were deported from Crimea, but also other ethnicities were deported. I agree that that is true, but other ethnicities were not subject to genocide and they were not repressed, as badly repressed as the Crimean Tatars. So there was a rally on one side, but on the other side, the Crimean Tatars were not allowed to organize any rallies and on the territory of the peninsula. So they kept receiving warnings from the occupational administration that it's not possible to organize any rallies related to this sad anniversary. We were receiving statements, we were receiving warning statements, we saw them. So nothing has changed since 7 years ago. So any rallies, any meetings in order to commemorate the victims of the genocide of 1944 are not possible. Yesterday, you mentioned that yesterday the government of Canada recognized the fact of genocide against Crimean Tatars in 1944. Myself, as an ex-ambassador of Ukraine to Canada, I'd like to assure you that Ukraine has been closely following the situation with Crimean Tatars. Canada was one of the first countries in the Western world that was actively responding against the repression of Crimean Tatars. However, the decision came to life only yesterday after the beginning of the Russian aggression. Why do you think it's so important? And what can you say on behalf of Ukraine about this? First of all, I'm grateful to the government of Canada and I'm grateful to other international partners who are preparing such decisions in and making such decisions in their parliaments, in their governing bodies. It's important to talk about the genocide against Crimean Tatars, taking into account the events of the 24th of February, the full-scale invasion into our country, because these crimes repeat. They say that some people do not learn from history. I believe that this genocide repeated because there were no repercussions for the first genocide. There was no tribunal after the Second World War, and the Russian Empire, the Russian leadership were not punished for what they did during the Second World War, after the Second World War, and before the Second World War. It's important that our international partners provide support to our country by creating the tribunal against the Russian Federation, where they are going to hear about the crimes of the Russian aggression, war crimes. It's important to keep working on the level of international courts where we press charges against Russian Federation to International Criminal Court. Russian Federation committed genocide crimes, because what we see now is genocide. I cannot find any other word to describe the atrocities. Ourselves, as representatives of Ukraine, we have to talk about that. Of course, we need to collect evidence. Of course, we need to prove the case in the court, but here that's the job of the lawyers. Here we have to prove the criminal intent and the knowledge. But if we analyze the stories and statements made by the leadership of the Russian Federation, this intent has been clearly communicated, that they have to do everything in order to resolve Ukrainian issue once and for good. Let's talk about the situation in Crimea. During the first days of the invasion, the Russian press were talking about the enthusiasm in Crimea, that people were happy about the beginning of this special military operation, etc. We have every suspicion to believe that such elated spirit changed and deteriorated. And we all know when the warship Moskva was put on fire and it downed. What has changed on the peninsula? The changes are massive. You remember our last meeting in Lviv, we had a briefing. Russian Federation is sustaining huge losses, and the losses are clearly seen on the territory of Crimea, and of course it affects the atmosphere on the peninsula. The losses were clearly seen by the population. A quarter of sailors who were on Moskva warship, they were conscripts. They were serving the army, doing that on the regular basis. Lots of people are afraid to join the Russian troops because they know that they will be cannon fodder, and they're also afraid that Russia might invade into the peninsula. So this is being actively discussed in the forums um, that we have on the peninsula. Also, we could hear and we know that on the territory of Crimean Peninsula, in Sevastopol and the Black Sea, very often there are attacks. They launch the rockets from Black Sea, from Sevastopol. You know that some of them were targeting Lviv. Of course, the atmosphere changed because people understand that we are not talking about victory here, not triumph of the Russian army in Ukraine, that they are suffering huge losses, including the losses among the local population. I'd like to share some figures that we know. We managed to verify 92 burials that took place in the territory of peninsulas. 48 are the citizens of Ukraine. I mean, people who were born in Crimea, because everybody who was born before 2014 and resided in Crimea, they are the citizens of Ukraine. So the funerals take place in every small and big city in Crimea. People are not happy. They don't want to die. They believed that the war is never going to knock on their door, but it did. And unfortunately, they feel the outcomes of the war. They see the scarcity of food, medical supplies, because supply chains have been disrupted after the 24th of February, because everything has been supplied from the territory of Russian Federation, and now it has been complicated. My last question for you. This war started with the annexation of Crimea. How can we make sure that this war ends with full liberation of Crimea, that the whole world can see that? So will Crimean Platform help us here? Of course. Crimean Platform, that's the tool that we introduced last year with the initiative of following the initiative of the president of Ukraine. Our president keeps saying that the war started not on the 24th of February, but 8 years ago with the temporary annexation of Crimean Peninsula, and the war will be over once we restore the complete control of our territory, including Crimean Peninsula and Sevastopol. We have to understand that as long as we have Russian troops on the territory of Crimean Peninsula, we will be living in danger. We will be anticipating attacks any day, because Crimea is a perfect platform for attacks by the Russian Federation. Regarding Crimean Platform, we keep cooperating with our international partners regarding the policy of non-recognition of Crimean annexation. We also work with our population together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Last week, we had a series of meetings with the representatives of Crimean Platform Network. Last week, we were receiving our international partners from Crimean Platform in Kyiv. We all have the united stance. We all understand that the war will be over once we restore our territorial integrity. And of course, for the politicians abroad, once they lift the sanctions after the active hostilities, and even if Russian Federation will go back to the borders before the 24th of February, I believe that sanctions should not be lifted. So sanctions should be preserved until the whole territory of Ukraine is liberated. Thank you, Tamila. Let me just remind you that our guest was Tamila Tasheva, permanent